What if the most infamous prison in America wasn't really a prison at all? Alcatraz, a name that sends chills down your spine. Known for housing the worst of the worst, killers, gangsters, masterminds, a place designed to be escape-proof, story-proof and mystery-proof. But in 2023, during a routine restoration, construction teams uncovered something no one could explain. Behind a sealed segment of wall, deep beneath the island's main structure, was a tunnel. Not just any tunnel. This one was reinforced with pre-prison era military-grade steel, completely undocumented and untouched since the 1920s. Inside were Cold War encryption devices, naval tide maps, and a room that looked more like a command post than a prison cell. Then came the skeleton, curled near a pool of stagnant water, clutching a rotting satchel, and next to it a chilling message carved into stone. "They left me here." The gear matched 1960s intelligence tools. The room was soundproofed, and the identity of the body, unknown to prison or military records. That changes everything. Could Alcatraz have been more than a prison? Was it a covert intelligence hub, hidden in plain sight, operating behind the smokescreen of bars and barbed wire? Why did the tunnel predate the prison? What was Project Warden's Shadow? And who was meant to use these secret facilities? This isn't just another prison documentary. This is a secret unraveling, a story buried beneath cement and silence. And by the time we're done, you'll see that Alcatraz may have been the perfect Cold War experiment, because it was designed to hide secrets, not just inmates. The discovery started with a cracked wall, nothing unusual in a century-old structure, weathered by sea, salt, and time. But when restoration workers removed a segment behind Block C, they didn't find pipes, concrete, or anything from the prison's documented blueprints. They found air, a hollow cavity where solid stone should have been. Behind the wall was a narrow tunnel, carved at a slight decline, descending deeper than any known infrastructure on the island. But this wasn't a forgotten maintenance shaft or some unfinished access corridor. It was perfectly shaped, reinforced with steel brackets, each etched with serial numbers dating back to 1921. That's more than a decade before Alcatraz became a federal penitentiary. That single detail sent alarms through the team. Why would a reinforced military-grade tunnel exist before the prison was even constructed? The passage had no lighting, no ventilation, no electrical work. Nothing about it aligned with prison operations. The walls were smooth, the structure pristine, the air dry and still. There were no scratches, no tool marks, no signs of modification. Whoever built it with meticulous intent. When FBI forensic engineers were brought in, they were stunned. The tunnel wasn't damaged or deteriorating. It was sealed, intentionally. At the lowest point, it ended at a reinforced steel hatch that led into a hidden chamber. That chamber would become the centerpiece of one of the strangest finds in the island's history. Inside, 3 metal cots laid with military precision, a Cold War-era field radio, tidal charts pinned to the wall, a corkboard with faded notes. No dust, no corrosion, everything preserved by the sealed atmosphere. It looked like someone had stepped out just yesterday, not decades ago. The airtightness of the room raised suspicions. This wasn't a fallout shelter or a prison subcell. It was something else, something more deliberate, even more disturbing. There were no plumbing lines, no connections to the rest of the prison, no access to food or sanitation. Whoever was placed here was meant to stay out of sight, out of reach, and perhaps out of memory. Declassified documents later traced the steel brackets to a defense contractor that had provided materials for naval projects along the Pacific coast. How those same materials ended up beneath Alcatraz remains unanswered. Some historians suggest it was part of an off-the-books military logistics upgrade. Others aren't so sure. A dive into the National Archives turned up obscure paperwork filed in 1923 referencing strategic infrastructure support on Alcatraz. No diagrams, no names, just a signature block marked confidential use only. When former prison staff were interviewed, none had ever heard of a tunnel under Block C. In fact, multiple supervisors swore no subsurface pathways existed beyond a utility access. One even claimed that part of the island was solid rock, no way anything's under there. But something was. To add to the puzzle, the tunnel was completely misaligned with any existing construction. It didn't go toward the shore, or the utility network, or even the cell blocks. It curved, narrowed, and dropped sharply into that concealed room, like it was trying to evade being mapped at all. In an internal report, one FBI official wrote, "This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't abandoned. This was hidden. By design." The deeper they investigated, the clearer it became. This was only the first clue, a fragment of something bigger, buried beneath decades of cement, silence, and secrets. As investigators examined the tunnel and its eerie contents, a troubling theory began to emerge, one that extended far beyond the prison's original purpose. Her theory tied not to inmates or wardens, but to intelligence operatives. In 2025, declassified FBI files introduced a chilling name into the public record: Project Warden's Shadow. Buried for over 6 decades, Warden's Shadow was allegedly a Cold War-era collaboration between the Department of Justice and covert elements within the CIA. Its mission? To study human behavior under extreme confinement and control, but not for rehabilitation or punishment, for exploitation. According to a leaked internal memo dated 1961, the project aimed to evaluate behavioral resilience under environmental and psychological stresses in a controlled isolation scenario. Translation? Psychological experiments using prisoners as unknowing test subjects, and there was no better place to do it than Alcatraz. The island was remote, heavily fortified, and surrounded by icy, deadly waters. It was already notorious for its brutal isolation protocols and minimal contact with the outside world. But what if those conditions weren't just punitive? What if they were intentional, engineered for experimentation? The chamber beneath the tunnel seemed to support that theory. 3 military-style cots, a primitive field radio, detailed tide maps, and encryption logs, all arranged with purpose. No toothbrushes, no clothing, no trace of long-term life. This wasn't a prison room. It looked more like a staging point, tactical, temporary, abandoned, but not forgotten. Researchers began comparing the findings to Project MK-Ultra, the CIA's infamous mind control program that subjected people to hypnosis, LSD, and sensory deprivation, often without consent. Warden's Shadow, though still officially unacknowledged, shared striking similarities: covert facilities, anonymous operatives, and invisible paper trails. One former intelligence officer, interviewed under anonymity, was blunt. Alcatraz wasn't just a prison, it was a lab. Warden's Shadow used it like a human simulation chamber. There's evidence to support that claim. Between 1959 and 1962, several high-value inmates were quietly transferred to Alcatraz. These weren't ordinary criminals. They included known mob associates, suspected foreign agents, and former military personnel flagged for strategic interest. Some were listed as restricted access inmates, a classification rarely seen in federal records. Memos from that era include terms like non-standard conditioning cycles, enhanced solitude environments, and variable stress input. None of these phrases appear in any prison training manual, but they fit the language of behavioral experimentation. Adding to the suspicions, maintenance logs from the same time frame include strange anomalies, power rerouting, unauthorized lighting zones, and limited entry protocols. These weren't one-off mistakes. They appeared month after month in the exact sectors later linked to the hidden chamber. A final 2025 declassified document referred to Alcatraz as an ideal Tier 2 covert logistics node. While the phrase sounds innocuous, it's a known intelligence classification, used to describe sites prepared for emergency communication or classified movement in national security scenarios. That single phrase ties together everything: the isolated location, the hidden tunnel, the surveillance, gear, the psychological files, and the complete absence of any trace in public archives. If Project Warden's Shadow was real, it means Alcatraz had 2 missions: one above ground, known to the world, and another far more secretive, beneath it, sealed behind steel and silence. The inmates may have believed they were just serving time, But some of them may have been part of an experiment they never even knew existed, and that makes the silence surrounding Warden's shadow even more unsettling. Because it wasn't just about what happened behind bars, it was about what was hidden below them. If the tunnel was strange, what lay at its very end was chilling. As the FBI forensic team combed through the chamber beneath Alcatraz, they noticed a collapsed segment at the far end. Dust and debris filled the narrow crevice, but something about the shape inside seemed unnatural. They began clearing it, and beneath the rubble, curled in on itself like someone trying to stay warm, was a skeleton. The remains were fragile but intact. Lying next to the body was a canvas satchel, half rotted from moisture exposure. Inside, hand-drawn maps, 3 1961 minted coins and cloth fragments, faded but clearly matching prison-issued uniforms. But most disturbing of all was a single phrase scratched into the stone wall behind him, now partially eroded by mineral deposits. "They left me here." Etched in shaky, uneven lines, desperate perhaps, furious, maybe both. Forensic analysis ruled out the possibility that this was one of the infamous 1962 escapees, Frank Morris or the Anglin brothers. Dental records, bone structure, and estimated age didn't match, nor did it align with Alan West, the fourth man who failed to flee. So who was this person? The FBI's internal notes hinted at a far more disturbing possibility: a non-rostered operative, someone whose presence on the island had never been recorded, someone who wasn't supposed to exist. The contents of the satchel only deepened the mystery. The maps were detailed, marked with tide patterns, perimeter patrol notes, and precise timing intervals. Whoever made them had insider knowledge. These weren't doodles of a desperate inmate, they were plans. The coins? Still shiny, sealed in a light wax, preserved, possibly for trading or bribery. For someone expecting to leave the island and needing quick currency. For someone with a mission, and that mission had clearly failed. Dr. Marcus Feldman, an intelligence historian, offered a grim theory. This may have been a disavowed operative, sent in with full deniability. If things went wrong, there would be no rescue, no record, no name, just a ghost in the system. The phrase scratched into the wall, "They left me here," wasn't just despair, it was accusation. Directed at whoever had sent him, whoever had turned their back. And the most haunting detail came from the lab report. The bones showed clear signs of post-mortem crushing from tunnel collapse. But before that, they revealed something worse: signs of starvation, malnutrition. This person hadn't died instantly. He was trapped, alone, and forgotten. There were no dog tags, no ID, no badge, no name, just a man in a tunnel, left behind. And if he was part of Project Warden's shadow, he might not have been the only one. The 1962 escape of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers is etched into American folklore, a tale of ingenuity, desperation, and enduring mystery. For decades, we believed they chipped through their cell walls, crafted a raft from raincoats, and risked the deadly waters of San Francisco Bay in a last-ditch bid for freedom. But in light of the tunnel discovery, the story takes on a new and far more calculated dimension. Just yards from the location of their breakout, the hidden tunnel beneath Block C was uncovered. It ran deep, curved unnaturally, and ended behind a sealed wall that showed signs of tampering, possibly even during the exact time frame of the escape. A recently declassified FBI file from 2023 puts it plainly: the existence of a concealed, subterranean corridor alters assumptions about all known escape routes. Previously, the focus was on makeshift tools, dummy heads, and homemade rafts. But the tunnel wasn't part of any inmate effort. It was military-grade, reinforced, hidden, behind false architecture. This wasn't an escape path built from desperation. It was a ghost road, silent, invisible, and already there. Could it have been part of the plan? Another FBI document notes that log entries from June 1962, right before the escape, are inexplicably missing. Surveillance notes, electrical data, even inspection reports from that week have gaps. In one redacted section, analysts found an unexplained power spike in the tunnel's mapped region. No one could account for it. And then there's the letter. In 2013, a note surfaced allegedly from John Anglin stating, "We made it that night, but barely." Many assumed it referred to surviving the icy waters. But what if it referred to a dangerous, restricted tunnel? A passage that only a few knew about and fewer were ever meant to use? Even Alan West, the fourth member of the escape, may have been excluded for a reason. He spoke too much, trusted too little. Some now believe the others were smuggled out, not by chance but by design. If true, then the 1962 escape wasn't a prison break. It was a retrieval, and the most famous escape in American history might have been a covert extraction hidden behind the perfect cover story. If the tunnel and hidden chamber suggested secrecy, the equipment inside confirmed it beyond any doubt. Among the most startling discoveries were devices never listed in any prison inventory. A Cold War-era shortwave radio, cipher wheels, rotary scramblers, and spools of unused signal wire. These weren't the kinds of tools used for plumbing or maintenance. They were standard-issue components for CIA field operations, especially during the peak of Cold War tension. And it wasn't just the hardware, it was how it was set up. Pinned to a corkboard above a rust-free steel desk were maps detailing naval traffic across San Francisco Bay, tide charts dated to specific weeks in 1962, handwritten transmission logs, schematic fragments referencing encryption protocols that were used exclusively by US intelligence teams between 1960 and 1964. The chamber didn't resemble a prison office or utility room. It looked like a covert communications post designed to observe, record, and possibly transmit. One investigator summarized it best. This wasn't an escape tunnel. It was a listening post. The pristine condition of the space was unnerving. Dust patterns were undisturbed. Wiring hadn't corroded. Even the air inside felt preserved, sealed off from time. Whoever operated this room locked it down intentionally, not abandoned but archived. Then came the clocks. Two identical clocks mounted on opposite walls, both frozen at the exact same. Time 2:17 a.m. Forensic analysts believe this may have marked a final transmission, a critical shutdown, or even a failed extraction event. Why two clocks? Why that time? No one knows for sure. But it suggests precision, purpose. Geography may provide answers. Alcatraz sits at a choke point for every ship entering or leaving San Francisco Bay. During the Cold War, such visibility was a strategic goldmine. From this vantage point, observers could track naval routes, intercept transmissions, and relay coded messages inland. More importantly, the island's restricted access offered the ultimate cover. No one suspected a spy center beneath a federal penitentiary. The island wasn't just designed to keep people inside. It was perfectly positioned to let intelligence flow outward, unnoticed, undetected, and undocumented. Alcatraz wasn't just silent because of isolation. It was silent because it had something to say, and no one was supposed to hear it. Alcatraz's power has never just come from its walls. It comes from its image, the rock, the legend, the impenetrable prison no one could escape. But that image, it turns out, may have been its greatest camouflage. For decades, media, museums, and movies painted Alcatraz as a monument to punishment, steel, bars, famous inmates, and desperate escape attempts. It became a symbol of justice, of control, of the inescapable reach of the American legal system. Even now, tourists snap photos of rusted cells and faded murals without realizing that beneath their feet may lie one of the most sophisticated Cold War secrets in the country. That duality is the real deception. By turning Alcatraz into a cultural myth, the government didn't just hide its secrets. They buried them under layers of folklore. The very notoriety of the prison helped mask its hidden uses. Who would ever suspect espionage activity at a site so obviously tied to criminals and confinement, as sociologist Dr. Ellen Ruiz explained in a 2025 Georgetown lecture. Cultural myth-making is one of the oldest tools of concealment. If you want to hide something, don't bury it. Broadcast something else louder. That's what happened at Alcatraz. And the broadcasting was deliberate. Declassified memos, show that as early as 1958, internal communications within the Department of Justice referenced narrative-shaping opportunities for Alcatraz. That same year, the prison was featured in a government-backed documentary that emphasized its toughness and inescapability. Not a word about its military past, not a whisper of its infrastructure below. Even the National Park Service, tasked with preserving and interpreting the site, was unaware of entire substructures. Their maps stopped where the secrets began. This wasn't negligence, it was design. Alcatraz was a dual-use facility. Above ground, it punished men. Below ground, it served agendas we're only beginning to understand. Its location, mystique, and cultural identity gave it the perfect cloak. Invisibility through visibility. And maybe that's the most chilling part. Not what was buried beneath Alcatraz, but how easily we were all misled. How the myths became louder than the truth. Because if a place that visible could hide something so vast, what else are we still not seeing? So what was Alcatraz really? A prison, absolutely. But also a stage, a mask. A story so perfectly crafted, it hid the truth in plain sight. We've uncovered a hidden tunnel built with military precision, completely absent from records. A sealed chamber containing encryption devices and Cold War surveillance maps. A skeleton, unregistered and forgotten, clutching a satchel and a chilling final message. They left me here. We've heard whispers of Project Warden's shadow, a rumored behavioral experiment targeting high-value inmates under the guise of punishment. We've traced intelligence-grade equipment to underground rooms no guard ever knew existed. And we've re-examined the 1962 escape, not as a desperate flight, but potentially as a pre-arranged extraction orchestrated from the inside. All of it points to one chilling reality. Alcatraz wasn't just about keeping people in, it was about keeping something else out of view. As more files surface and experts revisit long-standing assumptions, the picture becomes clearer. Alcatraz may have operated as a Cold War intelligence outpost, a surveillance relay, a testing ground for psychological experimentation, a bunker built not just to hold men, but to hold secrets deeply and deliberately. And the most unsettling part? It worked. For decades, the myth of Alcatraz, fueled by Hollywood, news headlines, and tourist guides, shielded its true nature. The legend protected the lie, and the public, unknowingly, became the perfect audience for history's greatest misdirection. But that illusion is cracking. History is shifting. And as more hidden truths come to light, we must ask harder questions, not just about Alcatraz, but about every official story we've accepted. So the real question isn't just what happened on that island, it's what else are we still blind to? If this video made you question what you thought you knew, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop your theories in the comments. What do you think Project Warden's shadow really was? Who was the man in the tunnel? Was the escape a smokescreen or something far more sinister? And don't stop here. Tap the next video to uncover even more secrets, ones that might completely rewrite the history you thought was true. Because sometimes the most terrifying truths are the ones buried just beneath the surface.